Today's presentation is going to be about the Peco how-to books. Hey guys, it's Dave the Train Guy from The Hobby Man by Hearns today. Now, if you're starting off in the hobby, and it's that time of year again when there's going to be train sets appearing under Christmas trees, and there could be a lot of family, father-son, father-daughter, or just someone wanting to get into the hobby or retirees, there's probably going to be a lot of questions they're going to ask, or you're going to ask, about how to lay track, how to do basic carpentry, how to do wiring, and it's all going to seem a little bit daunting and a little bit overwhelming. You may have gone to a model railway exhibition or two earlier in the year or during the year and or saw something on YouTube and thought that's a hobby for you and you want to get into it. And that's fantastic. But what a lot of people get overwhelmed with is just a lot of the basics. And you probably might see a fantastic layout and you'll be inspired, but you think, I'm not going to be able to do it. Well, everything is really just a series of small basic steps, whether it's putting two bits of pine together, putting a layer of ply on it, laying track, putting track clips in, building scenery out of plaster, laying ballast and putting flock. It's all really quite simple. But the first thing I always advise to people getting into the hobby is probably go for the Peco range of books, because it actually lays it out very simple and very basically, and it just keeps it all clear and concise. And we have actually a selection of them today. Yeah. So I'll just basically run through them. They're all available online. You can buy them at either store, at the Hearns or at the Hobby Man. And we usually have a good range of Peco how-to books. And without getting overly over the top and involved, we'll just quickly run through it. But a good one, especially if you're going to do English outline, because we are an OO specialist, is this one. So it basically runs you through the variations in what is OO and explains the difference, because there is a lot of confusion between HO and OO, and they do explain it very simplistically and very well. And there's other versions on the theme like 009, which is narrow gauge OO, and the history of OO, which sometimes is helpful to know. But anyway, as you work your way through the book, it'll be talking through finding a home for your layout, and that's usually a stumbling block for a lot of people. They don't feel they have the space and feel that they need to build some sort of ginormous empire, but you need an aircraft hangar to store it in. Well, it's usually the case that's not true. You can actually build a really good layout in a pretty confined space, and they actually explain all that here. And they do give you some practical examples of real life situations where people have built rather impressive layouts in small spaces. And we just have a bit of an overview of people's layouts. And we get the track plans, which is often very helpful in itself too. A lot of people would start with a pen and paper, but would probably either end up with something overly elaborate or unworkable. But there's some really good examples here. And you don't have to have a huge layout for it to be a good one. There's plenty of examples. And there's even lots of ideas in regards to storing it or dealing with the space issue. Okay. Just flip the page. And obviously, because they're printed by Peco, there's going to be a lot of emphasis on Peco track packs and set track, which we stock here at both stores. Okay, something that often trips up a lot of people is points or turnouts. Using flexi truck, basic wiring, such as initial frogs, electrofrogs or unifrogs, and power supply. A lot of this is daunting to a lot of people, and some people would probably imagine they have to go to night school or do an electrical course to understand it, but it's not the case. And there's also it tells you the basics of DCC and fitting decoders and what it is and how it all works. So it basically demystifies a lot of those nagging questions, and it elaborates into other things, just like adding extra detail, building kits, They even touch on such things as Metcalf kits, which are these cardboard kits. This sort of thing. We sell a lot of these, and these are extremely popular. They're a cardboard kit and very fitting for OO. Okay, moving along. There's lots of other helpful books. Set Track. If you don't want to cut track and play around with FlexiTrack, Set Track is a very good way to go because it makes it so much easier. And again, there's going to be lots of examples. It makes it especially easy because you'll have emphasis on Peco products, which we carry. Things like basic carpentry, important to know. Track laying. Like I said before, most Peco books will have an overlay. So if they talk about it in one area, they'll always bring it up again in another book. Things like point motors, static grass application. And as I mentioned, this book is predominantly about track plans, but they talk about things such as scenery. Yeah. And what I do like about this book is a lot of good examples of what can be achieved in a very small piece of area. Like we're talking 5 foot by 4 foot to achieve that workable layout. And they give you a drawing or an image of what can be achieved. And we got more examples here. There's loads of examples. And you can sort of visualize it through the drawings. So Peco has had generations of or decades of experience with track and track plans, so they know their stuff. So these are all very workable. Right, moving along. There's lots of different examples. And some of these layouts are obviously getting more and more elaborate. Now, like, look at the size on that. That is just massive. Oh, and there's even one here on a scrapyard. May not be for everyone's taste, but there's actually a suggestion there, if you can see it, on how to build a scrapyard for steam engines. Alright, that's another good theme too. It's one I always suggest to customers. If you don't have much space, build a factory scene or a dock. That way you can have small shunting engines, lots of activity in very confined space. On that theme, there's also one for N scale. So if you use it, for you people out there that want to get into N scale, again, it's very much the same style. It'll talk about the history of N scale. There'll be lots of inspirational layouts. Again, they'll be touching on things such as decoders, wiring up N scale locomotives. Again, point motors, it's pretty much the same as RHO and OO, but it's nice to have it all explained. And there'll be a smattering of track plans. Also in the theme, and this is a good one, heritage railways. It's rather clever. A lot of us might want something from the past, but also like diesels. And the theme of this book is that your layout is going to be a museum, a working museum. So that way you can have the best of both worlds. Whether it's based on a real museum or a fictitious one, or a preservation railway. And again, there's going to be lots of inspirational examples of the real life examples. As in the UK, rail preservation is very strong, as it is in Australia, but it's probably to a slightly higher level. And again, we have like suggestions on track plans based on, again, railway museums and preservation railways. Yeah, just like this sort of thing here where you have crowd control fences. You can have an old historical steam engine, but you can have people in modern attire, modern cars. You could have your BMWs and your Audis in the car park, but you can have your old steam engines. So it makes it quite legit. And again, there's a lot. And there's even a suggestion here on how to do narrow gauge railway. And there's plenty of preservation railways that use narrow gauge. Third for four. And moving along, we have one which is, again, very interesting. Narrow gauge model railway. Peco specialise in all gauges and all scales of model railway track. So, and one area they are very strong in is like 009 or HOE, HON3. There's a whole list of different scales and gauges. And again, this book would run through, it gives you a brief rundown on what narrow gauge railway is. And one of the benefits with using narrow gauge, just like in real life, is that because the rails are closer together, you can have tighter curves, more dramatic, I suppose you could incorporate more dramatic scenery into your layout. And it also has a sort of a high acutesy, sort of almost like lots of character built into a narrow gauge railway, which makes it very appealing. And again, there's lots of inspiration here. There's a good table here that explains it all, and it can be quite confusing for someone, even for hardcore train enthusiasts, to remember what scale is what. And like I said, like ON30, that'll be O scale but running on HO scaled track. Of course, the sleeper spacings will be different, but the gauge will be at 16.5, for example, or you have HO or 009, which is 00 scale, but running on 9mm track to represent narrow gauge track. So this spells it all out, so that way you know what you're talking about if you get started into the hobby. And anyway, back to the book. As you can see, as I'm flicking through here, there's a lot of inspiration. I love that word. Even little quarry railways have a lot of character. Nothing exciting, nothing fast, but it just gives you an opportunity to have lots of weathered rolling stock, unkept track, rundown equipment, which can in itself be really interesting. Not everything has to be the Flying Scotsman or the HST 125 or the TGV. You can just have a little quarry railway. Now, narrow gauge can also be represented in the larger scale. So here, for example, they're talking about 1 to 48. And you can still see by the pictures, yeah, that's really great. And obviously there's going to be a big emphasis on the Festiniog in Wales being English. It's probably one of the oldest preservation railways in the world. And towards the back, they actually have a good section on narrow gauge railways from around the world. So narrow gauge railway do exist in other countries, such as it exists in China, it exists in France. Even though all these countries had standard gauge, which is 4 foot and 8.5 inches, it does exist even in countries like Australia is a classic example of a high use of narrow gauge in all the various states, such as Western Australia, Queensland, bits of South Australia and Tasmania. They are all narrow gauge. So Australia was also a heavily narrow gauged country. We're talking Thailand, China, Australia, India. Yeah, and they do touch on modelling overseas railway. So for us Australians, yeah, there's something we could pull out of this. And again, they will touch on the basics. And finally, in our lineup, track plans. Regardless of what you've come up with, this could be very useful. And as you'd come to expect, it'll go over the basic layouts, something just functional. Nothing too complicated. And they'll give you sort of like an idea of how and why and what you're trying to replicate. Again, if you are getting into the hobby, this could be so valuable. Okay. well, there you go. I hope that's of some help. If you are interested, yeah, these can be ordered online or you can buy them in store. Any orders over $100, or we do postage free throughout Australia, but they are available, like I said, in store or online. So until next time, happy modelling and bye for now. See ya.